In this story, you'll hear about a man whose life was shattered by betrayal, and how, years later, an unexpected twist at a wedding changed everything. Really, Dad? You are an ass. Mom was right. That was the last thing I heard from my daughter before I hung up the phone. Over the next few days, she attempted to send me text messages, but I deleted them. She also tried to send me a few voice messages, but I deleted them after hearing the first few words. All of them were just my ex-wife's words, delivered in my daughter's voice. She made her decision 10 years ago and is content with it, believing that the so-called olive branch was nothing more than an insult. I'm Tom Williams, and I was married to Kayla Williams for about 17 years before everything fell apart. Naturally, I was held responsible for it. This is what happens to innocent people in our amazing divorce courts in this country. They blame the man and then grant the ex-wife full custody so she can tell the children what a terrible father he is. I'm positive that the divorce laws in this country were created by a group of feminists who despise men and want to screw anyone with a penis, as I mentioned. We had a 14-year-old son and a 16-year-old daughter. I thought everything was going well. I loved my wife, and I was certain she loved me. Our kids were smart, athletic, well-behaved, and adorable. Josh was a friendly, athletic boy, and Carly was a daddy's girl. I was earning a respectable living as a mechanical engineer, and Kayla was doing well as an accountant. We both played sports to stay in shape, and we were both quite adorable. As I mentioned earlier, Carrie was a daddy's girl to the core. She seemed to idolize me. I was surrounded by her little finger. She was good at math and science and decided she wanted to be an engineer like her father. She got her driver's license the day she turned 16. She loved to drive, just like me. And from the age of 10, she would go to the garage and give me wrenches while I worked on the various toys I got. I am an unabashed tech enthusiast, and I like old cars, mostly GM models that I can play with and collect. She also instilled in me a passion for them, and occasionally on the weekends we would spend the entire day at car shows. I was also pretty good at housework, and Kari always enjoyed helping me when I did things around the house. I taught her the fundamentals of plumbing, electrical work, drywall, and painting, and she was by my side when I was installing new appliances. She even helped me with the new concrete slab I put down next to the store. However, Carly turned to her mother for girl problems, which I was very glad about because I was the one she came to for advice. Josh was never interested in cars and mechanics like his older sister. He was a good student but wasn't particularly excited about science. Instead, he excelled in English literature and social studies. He began talking about becoming a lawyer, of course, and he and I hung out together. He needed help with everything else: homework, drama, friends, advice on things she was thinking of doing, boys, etc. We were very open and honest with each other when she was in trouble. Seemed to be more attached to his mother than to me. Over the past few weeks, Kayla has been acting a little strange. It wasn't a big deal, but she seemed a little distant, and I've noticed that she's been shutting down for a minute or two on a few occasions lately. Usually I liked it when she blew me off, but this time it wasn't the case. It was Friday night and I had just arrived home from work at 6 as wows. As is customary on a Friday night, I noticed that I put my briefcase in my office and went upstairs to change into more comfortable clothes for the evening. When I entered the bedroom, I noticed that my wife had laid out her LBD dress, sexy lingerie stockings and gars, as well as 6-inch CFMs on the table that I had entered. I yelled that I was home as usual, but strangely enough, there were no smells of dinner cooking. Kari didn't come down to greet me either, even though she's a teenager now, but she usually does. I wish she had warned me about the lack of odor at dinner, but I didn't have any other plans. Anyhow, when I walked in, Kia was still in the bathroom putting on makeup. I asked, "Where are we going, honey?" And she said, "That's weird." "Well, if we're not going anywhere, why are you wearing so much makeup and laying out a sexy outfit on the bed?" I replied, "We're not going anywhere, I'm going really, where are you going in that?" She calmly said, "You're crazy, what the hell? Do you think I'm going to put up with this for a second? Screw it if you want to go out. I don't know exactly where my date will take me, but I probably won't get home until tomorrow morning." "What do you mean, your date, and you're not coming? Back until morning?" I said, "Have a date tonight, and if everything goes according to plan, I'll spend the night with him. I need this night. We've been married for 17 years, and I just need to go out once to show that I'm still attractive to other guys. If you truly love me, you'll let me have this night, and it won't even be noticeable if you truly didn't think about it. I love you, but I need this because I'm getting older, and I need to feel like I'm still attractive to other men. And have some fun. You can wait until the divorce is final. Stop being foolish. It's just one night of sex to convince myself that I'm still a sexy woman attractive to other men. It's just a confidence boost for me because I've noticed a few wrinkles and a couple gray hairs starting to show through, and I need a boost to my ego. I don't need it, and I'm not going to put up with it. Clarence, in particular, is about 10 years younger than me. He's been flirting with me for the past 6 months, and I've finally accepted his proposal. Otherwise, you're breaking your vows. Just one night after I get home. I'll never do it again. Are you stupid? Or does someone think I'm stupid after you broke the vows you made to me in front of God, family, and friends? Do you really think I'm going to believe your straightforward private promise? In other words, if you follow through on this, it's over between us. I'm going to see a lawyer as soon as possible. Don't be a fool, there won't be a divorce. I'm going to return home and be the devoted, loving wife I've always been. If you try to divorce me, I'll fight as hard as I can, and in the end, you'll lose the house and most of your possessions, and I'll get full custody of the kids. In addition, I'll do everything in my power to ruin your dating life and make your kids despise you." I was shocked to hear her say that you say you love me, but you do all of this to damn right. I'm going to fight you because I don't want to lose you, so I'm just giving you the consequences of your behavior. You see, I told you that I only need one night to prove that I'm still sexy and attractive. Well, what about in a few more years? When you start to doubt your ability to be attracted to a younger man, I assure you that won't happen. Yes, I overheard some gossip, and I'm curious, but it's just going to be sex. There won't be any love, and you have nothing to fear him stealing me away. I've already explained the consequences of your actions, so if you follow through, we can go through marriage counseling and try to save our marriage. Don't be foolish. If you really insist on counseling to heal your bruised ego, we'll be fine. As I mentioned earlier, it's just a one-time thing to get it all out of your head. Maybe I'll even learn a few things to diversify our sex life. A couple of new tricks will liven up our lovemaking. After a while, she came downstairs dressed in the clothes she had laid out on the table, a small clutch in her hands, and she was looking at herself in the mirror by the door. I sat in my chair in the living room when a car horn sounded outside saying, "He's here. I have to go now. I'll see you in the morning." She walked over and kissed me goodbye, and I turned my head and backed away from her. She ended up kissing the air before looking at me with I made one last request to her. "If you walk out that door, it's over between us. You'd better think twice about throwing 17 years of marriage away." She turned to face me. "I'm not throwing anything away. Like I said, I'll be back and everything will fall into place." Frown. "Fine. Let it be like this once you calm down." She opened the door and stepped out. Yes, I started crying about losing. My marriage and the woman I had loved exclusively for the eye didn't understand how she could do this to me after 20 years. 17 years of marriage, 1 year of engagement, and 2 years of exclusive dating. She never showed any signs of displeasure, and we had a normal sexual life. She never asked for more, and I would have been happy to give it to her if she wanted it. We didn't argue about anything. Sure, we had our disagreements like all couples do, but we still talked it out and came to an agreement. I had already decided what I would do if she went for it, and half an hour later I finally got up. It was a fairly large house with 4 bedrooms, including a master bedroom, Carly's room, Josh's room, and a large guest bedroom that was actually a second master bedroom with a private bath that we used when she or my family came over. I guess I waited that half hour for her to come to senses and return, but obviously that didn't happen. I went upstairs and started putting my plan into action. It wasn't a great plan, but it was the best I could do at the time. I had no illusions about what would happen in our divorce because it was a no-fault state, which means that the state's divorce laws were drafted by feminists who despise men. Basically, unless the wife was found guilty of a serious crime and sentenced to at least 10 years in prison, the husband was screwed. It didn't matter if the husband was a completely innocent victim. The wife ended up receiving the house, the children's alimony maintenance, formerly known as child support, and after settling into my new temporary living quarters, I went down to the home office and logged into our online banking. A few years prior, I had opened another account in my name so that I could buy her gifts, and she would be surprised that we both had access to our finances. She would frequently check our finances and happen to see a purchase I had made for her, so naturally there were no surprises. I decided to repurpose that account, which she knew about but had no access to, by first transferring exactly half of our checking and savings accounts to my personal account, then using the remaining funds in the joint account to pay off and cancel all of our credit cards. I then issued a number of new cards in my name only. Yes, I should have paid off everything before transferring the money, but I did this on her birthday or Christmas, so I could buy her gifts and not tell her what she would get in advance. I decided that I would rather pay whatever the court ordered me to pay than attempt to collect anything from her. I would transfer my work-related direct deposits to my personal account on Monday morning when I arrived at work. I would also need to call our broker and request that we split investments on Monday after completing everything I could. I then went up to my room for the night, finished my drink, and got ready for bed. Unfortunately, I didn't get a good night's sleep because I was used to sleeping next to my wife without her. It was a long night and I dozed off occasionally, but not too much. When light began to come through the window, I finally decided to get up because I was still tired and decided to take a shower more to help me wake up completely after shaving. The bed felt empty, and then my thoughts just wouldn't stop. I kept thinking about what I could have done to stop it. Should I have tried to get her to stay out the door, physically restrain her, and go to this asshole's car with a baseball bat, gun? When Kayla returned home at 9 in the morning, I was sitting in my office at my computer looking at apartments for rent. I had already done the research on the attorneys and made an appointment for Monday afternoon through their online scheduling. "Good morning, sweetheart. I'm home as promised." She greeted me cheerfully as I entered the house. I put on jeans and a t-shirt, went downstairs, ate breakfast, and had a couple cups of coffee while reading the paper. As I sipped my coffee this morning, I realized that I had done nothing to deserve such disrespect from her, and that I could have done nothing to stop her from doing what she had done. It was all on her conscience. If I had somehow managed to stop her date last night, she would have just done it again another time. Many people say that you can't stop loving someone all of a sudden, and they may be right, but what you can do is turn your back on them. Marriage counselors can frequently save a marriage if there is hatred by transforming it back into love. If there is indifference, there is no chance at all. The love I had for my wife yesterday until I got home has now turned into hate. Doing this was surprisingly simple. All I had to do was concentrate on the disrespect she was showing me. Then I added her threats against me if I disagreed. And finally, she showed no concern for my feelings. I had a few hours to think about all of this. She called out to me, went around the house looking for me, and said, "I'm back and now things can go back to normal." She continued walking over to my desk, walking around the table and reaching out her arms to hug and kiss me. I shoved her back, telling her to keep her filthy, sick lips off me. God only knows what they've touched and what filthy has been in your mouth. Her eyes widened in shock. "Where are you, honey?" "I'm home, just like I told you. I even cleaned myself before coming to your house, honey." Before she could reply, I said, "You need to go to the clinic and get a full set of STD tests. I want to see a notarized clean report from you too much." I watched her face change from shock to anger, hoping she would realize what she had done and repent. "I see you're still dealing with your bruised ego. I'm going to go up to our room and take a nap. I've had a long night and I want to get some rest. I hope you've calmed down by now. In all the years I've known her, I've never spoken to her like that, and we can talk later. I expect you to fully apologize for your rudeness this morning." With those words, she turned and left the room, and I couldn't help but smile, expecting her to return soon. I didn't have to be disappointed. "What the hell did you do?" I heard her yell as she stepped back, asking, "Where are your clothes and toiletries? What the hell do you think you're doing?" she muttered, storming back into my office. "What do you mean?" I calmly asked. "All of my things are exactly where they should be. What are you talking about?" She cried in desperation. "I see your problem. And you still mistakenly think your bedroom is our bedroom. I just told you that all of my stuff is where it belongs, in my bedroom. Your closet is empty, your drawers are your corner, and your dressing table is empty. What do you mean? Everything is lying where it should be. My clothes hang neatly in my closet or folded, and in my dresser, toiletries are neatly in their places, the bathroom. Yes, I told you that I wouldn't put up with it, so I moved out of your bedroom and will stay in my new bedroom until I find an apartment and move out." I considered telling her about our finances, but I decided to let her figure it out on her own because there was no point in ruining the surprise until I had figured out the investments. Her eyes narrowed in frustration, but we'll talk about this later. I'll give you a week to recover, after which I'll put everything back in order, and we'll resume our regular schedule. Not until I receive a notarized report that I waved it off. Went back to the computer, and spent the majority of the day in my office. The kids came home early, and I wondered for a moment how long it would take them to realize that something was wrong. I found some apartments that looked good, filled out the necessary paperwork, and scheduled a visit with them on Tuesday. I then printed out our financial statements, which I would need for my lawyer on Monday, even though I had no illusions about selling the house. I reasoned that figuring out its value might, in theory, she would owe me half the value of the share. But I still spent the rest of the day researching our state's divorce laws. I knew I was going to lose, but at least I had a sense of how bad it would have been, and it would have helped me come up with a plan of action. "If not anything else, dinner is ready," said Carrie, poking her head through the door. "Okay, sweetie." "Thank you," Kayla said with a radiant smile as I entered the kitchen, making it clear that her intention was to kill me with kindness and demonstrate to me what I would. I saw the pain in her eyes as I pulled away from her, so I took the glass from her, walked over to the sink, poured out the water, and placed the glass on the counter. She did the best she could, got dressed, put on makeup, and styled her hair in a way I liked. She spent a lot of time in the kitchen that day preparing my favorite meal. When I came in, she came over to me and held out a glass of wine. "I poured you a glass." She leaned in for a kiss, and I took a tumbler out of the... It was impossible that the children at the table would not notice this, so I walked over to the table, put a few ice cubes in it, and then poured a couple fingers of Jim Beam in it. I didn't even focus on my wife. Dinner was obviously a stretch, and I kept the kids talking as much as I could, but it was pretty clear that we were in serious trouble. It didn't help that I didn't even put anything on my plate, let alone eat anything. These dishes were my favorites, but I just passed the bowls. After the most awkward dinner in human history, I simply got up, refilled my glass, and headed back to the office without even bothering to help clear my desk. After about 30 minutes, I shut down my computer, grabbed the keys to my truck, and left the house to go to a nice quiet restaurant for dinner. After that, I stopped at a bar to have a drink. I continued trying to talk to the kids while sipping my drink. "Dad, aren't you going to eat anything?" Josh asked. "Dad?" After having a few drinks, I realized that Kayla's bedroom light was still on when I got home. I made sure the door was loud enough for her to hear, locked it, and slid a chair under the handle. As I was getting ready for bed, I heard her try the knob and then knock. She tried to open the door for about 5 minutes before giving up, so the following morning I got up early and decided that today would be a soccer day. There were 3 games in the morning, afternoon, and evening. Would watch them all. Yes, there were things to do this weekend, but I chose to ignore them and get rid of them. Kayla can just assign it to someone else. I had already finished my coffee and was getting ready to make an omelet for breakfast when Carly entered the kitchen. "Sure, Dad, thank you," she said, taking her juice. She then sat down at the table and I began preparing the food. A few minutes later, Josh arrived. So I told him to cook, Carly finished her omelet as soon as I finished his sister's food, so I poured the last of my coffee into my glass and turned off the kettle when I heard Kayla in the hallway. She came in shuffling, took a cup from the cupboard, and looked at the empty pot. She looked at me and said, "The pot is right here, you know how to cook it, never mind, so you're making scrambled eggs made them just finished, but feel free to make yourself one." I put one on Josh's plate after responding. I was watching the morning game in the living room when Kayla came in with a plate and a bottle of beer. She placed everything on the coffee table in front of me and said, "I brought you lunch and beer so you won't miss any games." Without looking at her, I kicked the plate and bottle off the table and onto the floor, and she stood there amazed. This was the last of what I had made for him, even putting all the ingredients away already. "We need to talk about this." When the commercial started, I got up, went to the kitchen, and got myself a beer. Yes, I could hear you all crying about alcohol abuse because I spilled all the beer on the floor. I wasn't going to drink anything she brought me, so it would have been a waste anyhow. I didn't clean up after her. She brought it in unwanted so she could clean it up herself. I didn't care if she stained the carpet. I wasn't going to live here for long. It's getting close to noon, but at least they were considerate enough to wait until after the break when Carly and Josh came in together and sat down on the couch facing me. "Dad, what's going on between you and Mom?" Carly began. "Well, now you might know your mom and I are getting a divorce, it has. Say, you need to do something about your attitude. The kids have already noticed. By all means, I'm sure they'll notice. When I move out anyway. Nothing to do with either of you. We both love you. This is just between your mom and me, but why ask Josh? Your mother did something that I find hard to believe, even after I told her how I felt about it. She doesn't seem to regret it at all. For example, when she asked Carly about it on her date on Friday night, I was shocked. Yes, Mom told us that you weren't thrilled about it, so you know she cheated on me. But she didn't tell you about it beforehand, so she wasn't sneaking behind your back." Josh clarified, "Yes, Dad, but it was only one night out of the 20 years you dated and were married." And she said, "If you really loved her, you would have just let her have that night and moved on with your life." Carrie added, "To be honest, I was shocked and hurt that my daddy's girl didn't even bother to understand my position. She took her mother's side and didn't even want to hear my point of view. Really, how about if she loved me? Then let's talk about her promises. A little over 17 years ago, she made a solemn vow to me in front of God, our families, and our friends that she would never have sex with anyone else again. There were no exceptions to this vow, and its duration was limited to till death do us part. In case you haven't noticed, none of us are dead. If she can so easily break this solemn vow made in public, how can I trust the promises she makes to me in real life? We simply don't understand why you would want to split up your family over one night. I asked Carly why you are saying I'm destroying the family, and why am I being blamed for what she did? Mom isn't going to leave. She wants to put it all behind her and move on. Private, yes, but you also promised to be there for her in good times and bad. Josh considered becoming a lawyer, hoping he'd be much better at it. The situation did not improve after Carly made a big deal out of it and insisted that leaving would ruin the family. I tried to explain my position, but they didn't listen and weren't interested in what I had to say. Kayla had been filling their heads with her nonsense all day, and all they knew was that Mom had done something she truly needed to do, and Dad didn't love her and the kids enough to meet her needs. She persuaded them that Daddy's little male ego caused him to abandon them all and destroy the family, and that it was Daddy's fault for. When it became apparent that I wouldn't accept their position, they finally left. I was able to watch the remainder of the game in peace, and as the game was coming to an end, I could smell the aromas of dinner being prepared. However, Dad's stubbornness caused everyone to suffer. Even though it was only one night out of 85 nights, 20 years, 365 days a year, plus one extra day and 5 leap years. In anticipation of the night's game, which was scheduled to begin in 20 minutes, I sat and watched the post-game show. Josh arrived and said that dinner was ready. So I got up, grabbed my truck keys, and made my way to the door. "Where are you going?" Josh asked. "I'm going to the sports bar to watch the game." "I'll get something to eat there," I replied. "But Mom fixed it, so I'll be back after the game and probably be here for a while after it's over." Even though I sat there after the game, they had a really good burger and seasoned fries, and the beer was good too. Since I only had one beer per quarter, I was able to drive home. And since it was only 5 minutes away, everyone had already gone to bed when I arrived. So I just went to my bedroom, locked the door, and put the coffee table and bed plate away. That made me happy. On Monday morning, I got up early and left the house before anyone had even woken up. I called my broker as soon as I arrived at work and told him that I was divorcing, and asked him to divide all of our investments in half. He opened a new account in my name alone and moved half of our investments into it. Next, I went to Human Resources and asked them to remove Kayla's name from the retirement account and designate Carly Josh as my heir. I also gave them my new bank account details so they could reroute my paycheck there. Finally, I told my boss that I would require time to recover from the divorce. I asked him to start working on the paperwork and asked him to get her a job on Monday. I didn't even bother driving home right after work because Monday Night Football was on. I was off to meet with my lawyer, and he was fine with it. He told me what I already knew, which was that there was a slim chance of getting custody, but it all depended on where the children wanted to live. Based on my conversation with them yesterday, the court was old enough to seriously consider their wishes. I went to the sports bar and got 3 tacos for $1, and I ate 3 during the first half and 3 more during the second half. I ignored Kayla's texts and phone calls, and when I answered Carly's and told her where I was, she gave me a nasty look. After the game, I simply went to my office and shut the door, and by the time I finished, everyone had gone to bed. On Tuesday morning, I got up early and left the house before I decided that I liked the bed that had been used and was going to pick it up, along with everything in my home office. By the time I got home, they were already eating dinner, and I smiled when I noticed that they hadn't even set out a plate for me. Everyone else was up and running smoothly, so I took the day off to look at apartments. I found a nice 2-bedroom apartment, and I put down a deposit so that I could move in on Saturday. I wasn't going to eat anyway, so I just went to the refrigerator and got everything I needed to make a big sandwich. After finishing the sandwich, I grabbed a bag of chips and a beer, and I went to my office. "Geez, Dad, why are you acting so rudely?" exclaimed Carly as she entered my office. "Car, simply put, your mother cheated on me. She had absolutely no respect for me, and then she threw it in my face. I'm not going to put up with that." I made it clear what would happen if she proceeded. "Carly, imagine how you would feel if your husband told you one night that he had a date with a younger, prettier woman and was going to spend the night with her. I'm sure I wouldn't like it much, but if he promised to come back to me, even if it was just once, I'd hope I loved him enough to get over it. Besides, if he told me about it first, it wouldn't seem like cheating, so please do me a favor." I turned my back on her and returned to work on Wednesday evening, which was an ambush. When I got home from work, both of her parents were already there. People often make fun of their in-laws, but I actually got along well with her parents. Look directly into your fiancé's eyes when you say your vows. Look into his loving eyes, and when you get to the part about leaving everyone else behind, imagine how the love in those eyes will turn to complete devastation. They welcomed me into their family as the son they never had, Charles. Her father was a huge tech enthusiast, and I was his only issue. He liked Fords, which is fine, but I could overlook the fact that he had a 1969 Mustang Fastback in perfect condition. I got along well with my parents, and we weren't one of those dysfunctional families where children grow up despising their parents. Of course, there were arguments, and they never held back from telling me when they believed that I was mistaken about something. And sometimes we just had to agree or disagree. So I went inside and noticed that the ambush had already been set up. I was a little perplexed, and I could understand why her parents would be there. After all, she is their daughter. But I couldn't understand why my own parents were there, as it seemed counterproductive for her. If she was trying to convince me to accept her infidelity, why would she invite someone who wouldn't be? I want you to know that Kayla's mother and I are very disappointed in what Kayla did that said, and we think you are overreacting to it. Yes, she went and had sex with another man, and it was extremely disrespectful to you, especially the way she did it. However, it was just one mistake. You two have been together for a total of 20 years, and you have 2 amazing children. You probably guessed by now that it took me a few more minutes to realize Tom Charles started. It was a planned event, most likely planned at least a week in advance, and she ambushed me an hour before she left, giving me no chance to resist. It was a complex scheme to trick me, and Mom decided to step in. She didn't cheat on you, told you that first, and you're right that she never asked. Nevertheless, you can definitely move past this small incident, and you don't have to ruin your family over one mistake. Doing it, and I had no say in it. Even when I voiced my strong objections, she didn't care about what I said, telling her that if she went for it, it would happen. Tom's father tried, and I understand your pain and anger, but we'll be here to help you heal. But consider what you'll do to your family. Kayla still loves you and says she won't do it again. We all believe that with some effort and counseling, you can get past this, and destroying your family is not the solution. I just stood there, completely stunned. My parents were really on her side, telling me that I had to accept her cheating. I just couldn't take it any longer, so I turned and walked out of the room headed for my bedroom. Kayla tried to follow me, but I closed the door in her direction. Man up and keep your family together. Think of your mother and me. These are our grandchildren, and we will do whatever it takes to maintain a relationship with them. Face 10. Minutes later, I changed into jeans, a casual shirt, and boots. I didn't say anything as I passed them in the living room and went out the front door. They were still sitting there, attempting to talk to me, but I ignored them. I simply went out the door, got into my truck, and drove to the sports bar for dinner and a few beers. Fortunately, the house was dark and quiet when I returned, and Thursday and Friday proceeded in the same manner. My kids were still upset with me. It was Friday night, and I had been home for about an hour. I was sitting in my office going through my belongings, deciding exactly what I would take tomorrow, and Kayla opened the door and walked in. She was wearing a see-through nightgown, stockings, a garter belt, and heeled shoes. I must admit that she looked amazing, and the kids are sleeping somewhere else tonight, so it's time for you to forget. I was surprised that Kayla still hadn't noticed that the credit cards weren't working, but I'm sure she will realize when she goes shopping on Saturday. Come to bed with me and stop this nonsense. I need you to make love to me all night long. I really need you to bring me back. I stared at her for a minute, but I didn't want to thank you. In addition, I haven't seen the clinic report confirming that you don't have any medical conditions, so stop being so ridiculous. I need you back in my bed. Your tantrums aren't working, so stop being so pathetic. I'm horny and I need sex. If you don't show even the slightest interest, I'll have to call Clarence again. She practically burned her tires as she raced down the street, taking advantage of the fact that the house was empty. I gathered a few things, disassembled the bed, and loaded it into the truck along with the majority of my belongings. However, if you're going to keep rejecting me, you're the one pushing me away to someone else. Have fun with it, and let me know if you bring him here so I can leave the smoke coming out of her ears and nose. I'll be sleeping on the couch in my office tonight after loading everything I wanted to take with me into the truck. When I got back, no one was home yet, so the neighbor's teenage son helped me load. The couch wasn't the most comfortable one I'd ever slept on, but that was okay because I was at the leasing office early the following morning to get the key apartment. Fortunately, a couple of friendly neighbors helped me get everything out of the truck and into the apartment. I'm surprised that no one noticed the missing chair when my phone rang early in the evening and I saw it was my daughter. I answered, "Duyadi, where are you?" and found that your office was cleaned out. The bed and dresser in the spare bedroom were gone, and your chair was missing. The desk, office furniture, computer, printer, and accessories went into the cabin. I thought, fuck it, I'll take the chair too, and looked back at the living room. In addition to the living room, I searched everywhere and you weren't there. and your truck is gone. You're right, I'm at home, but I don't live there anymore. I moved into an apartment, so maybe after the divorce I'll buy another house, but for now this one will do, Dad. I can't believe you're acting so foolishly. I know you love us, sweetie, and always will, but not to the extent that you won't leave us. I'm not leaving you. You can still see me as much as you want, and I will continue to look after you. Yes, the divorce was a nightmare. She fought it to the end. She wanted me to pay for counseling, but I refused, arguing that if she needed it, she should pay for it. Your mother is the one who destroyed the family. I told her this is what would happen if she went on that date. But she did it anyway, because I thought you loved her enough to get over it, and I thought she loved me enough not to do it, okay? Then she hung up. The counselor didn't like me at all, and I believe it was because I told him that I was required to attend. But the judge didn't mention that I actually had to. I went through all 12 sessions before the counselor gave up, fighting over everything, including the worthless funny poster in the garage that she detested and suddenly couldn't live without. She also didn't like the Bud Light that I had left in the office by mistake, which she detested, but had been on my desk since college. The main reason she was redesigning the office was to make my divorce as difficult as possible. She made sure I didn't see the kids as much as possible during this time. And when the judge finally granted the divorce, I was forced to continue paying half of the mortgage. She kept the house, of course, and child support was $2,000 per month. But I was allowed to visit every Wednesday night and every weekend. What really irritated me, though, was that the $1,000 monthly spousal maintenance for 5 years was canceled. If she remarried during that time, I wasn't going to hold my breath. I found out that she had moved Clarence in with her before the divorce was even finalized, so yes, half of my paycheck went to her. I also cashed out some investments and purchased a small house that needed a lot of work, but at least I got it cheap, even on a 4-acre lot. Fortunately, I was able to get all of my tools out of the garage a week after moving in, but I wouldn't even bring them up. I had most of her jewelry before we even met, so I talked about it. Clothes, shoes, a roof, gas, electricity, running water, and a roof were sufficient for me. I moved into the house and began working on it during the evenings and weekends. Visitation was scheduled, and I did go there a few times, but it was a complete disaster. Kayla did everything she could to stop it, but the kids were busy, so they went away for the weekend with friends. It's funny that it was always my weekend and not hers. Oh, Kayla has dance practice on Wednesday. Josh hasn't. The few times I was able to visit the kids on Wednesday night, they treated me with animosity and continued to blame me for everything, even after I explained my point of view. The opposition literally holds them captive the entire time, and I only get an hour or two at most. After the third time, they bluntly told me they didn't want to see me anymore. Yes, I could force them to see me, but what would be the point? It would only make them more resentful. They have an important test on Thursday, and they need to study for it. I sent them birthday and Christmas cards, gifts, and letters, but they all returned unopened. I kept sending them checks every month, and I noticed that they were cashed, but I never heard anything about their graduation. I sent them a registered letter informing them of the college funds I had set up for them, but I received no gratitude. Kayla essentially put my kids on me as she had promised, so I concentrated on taking care of the house and nothing else. It's incredible how much. As if all of this wasn't bad enough, Mom said, when she picked up the phone today, "Are you?" She answered cheerfully, "Everything is going well as you'd expect anyway." I hadn't heard anything about Thanksgiving, so I asked, "Are you going to have it again this year?" There was silence on the other end. "Yeah, that's a little awkward. But Kayla's parents and kids are coming to the party, and she's also bringing the new man in her life. Mom, you're abandoning your own son for Thanksgiving and inviting my ex-wife and her boyfriend instead. Want to keep a close relationship with our grandchildren. This is your fault. You should have been working to keep the family together, not to tear it apart. Since the kids are still upset with you for leaving them, your presence here would be too awkward for everyone. How about coming to see us on Christmas Eve?" I spent Christmas Eve at home watching Die Hard, and ignoring the many calls and texts from my mom asking where I was. I wasn't in the mood for the holidays, so I was just looking at the packages I sent to my kids, which were returned to my doorstep a week ago yesterday. 5 years later, I received a wedding announcement. Kayla had married Clarence the weekend after I paid my bills. Your father and I will spend Christmas Day at Kayla's house, but we can celebrate with you the day before. Whatever, I muttered, ending the conversation. I was finally free of my ex-family and obligations to them after Josh turned 18 a year early, so I finished paying child support. I celebrated by getting drunk, though I'm not particularly proud of it. I gave it my all and gave them all the love I had, but they rejected me and treated me like a piece of shit. Now that all of my responsibilities to them and her 2 ungrateful offspring had been fulfilled, I made the decision to simply forget about them as much as possible, because they clearly didn't want a relationship with me in order to move on with my life and forget about them as quickly as possible. However, there was one thing that always bothered me. I had to continue paying half the mortgage on the house. Of course, this ended when Josh graduated, but my name was still on the deed. I believe Kayla thought she owned the house, but the divorce decreed she could only occupy it until the kids graduated from high school. This meant that I was entitled to half of the property, and it was a sizable property. I contacted my attorney. After a little internet research, I determined that the appraised value was now about $500,000, and the equity was $450,000. Yes, we only had $50,000 left on the promissory note. Why did I do it well for the money? Of course, who could use an extra $250,000? The house was appraised at about $300,000, and the equity was about $200,000 when we got divorced, and we have been paying our mortgage faithfully ever since. In addition, it would annoy Kayla, who loved this house and was upset that I had to pay her for anything. I was eager for any compensation for her efforts, and it would also cover all of the mortgage payments and house maintenance I had to pay for her. A week or so later, Tom called to ask how I was doing. Kayla was busy working and fixing up the house I had purchased, and I must say that I was shocked that you called to check on me after everything that had happened. The reason the realtor came to my house to look at it and get my signature on the sales contract is the first time we've spoken since the divorce. Oh well, let's be clear. Since both of our names are on the title, she will obviously need your signature for the sale. I love this house, but I'm not going to sell it, so when can I expect a check from you for my half of the capital? Nice try. I got the house in divorce, no. You only use it until Josh graduated from high school last month, so we can either sell it and divide the proceeds, or you can buy out my half. If you think I'm going to give you $100,000 for a house I own, you're crazy. The fact that you could have done that 5 years ago shows that I'm not asking for $100,000. Now, since the equity in the house is about $450,000, my half is $225,000. If you add up all the pricey furniture you simply had to have, let's round that amount up to $250,000. You're crazy. I'm not giving you a dime. A few months later, when the judge decided in my favor, I even persuaded the judge to make her pay her legal fees and my lawyer for bringing her to court over something that should have been settled out of court. The house appraised for more than I had anticipated. Including the value of the furniture, I got $775,000, and they ended up buying me out rather than selling me. She yelled and hung up the phone, and yes, I laughed when she hung up on me. I picked up an old 1972 Chevy pickup truck that was in poor condition. I was only interested in the chassis. The rest would have been replaced anyhow. Over the past year, I have disassembled, cleaned, and completely repainted it. Once the paint and bodywork were finished, it was time to work on the running gear. The rear differential was still good, but I mostly used Clarence's money, which ultimately got him into trouble. The transmission was a Borg-Warner T10 4-speed manual, so it was fast stuff. I decided to have some fun with the engine, which was only going to be a toy and not for daily driving. I found it online at a parts depot, bought it, and had it shipped. Once it arrived, I put it on the stand and began disassembling it. I had to send it to a machine shop to bore the cylinders connecting rod and cam and get a new forged crankshaft. with 10/1 pistons. Nice heavy cam heads were ported and polished, followed by the installation of double spring valves and a supercharger to get everything up to speed. I would probably have operated more gas stations than tire shops, and I would have operated very few gas stations. I used steel-braided hoses, polished the valve covers, and polished the aluminum on the supercharger. It nearly required sunglasses to open the hood the first time I hit the road, nearly wrecking it when I was traveling down the highway and made the terrible decision to punch it. The rear tires blew out instantly, and I barely managed to keep the vehicle in one piece. When I saw an advertisement for a public car show, I thought it would be fun, so I filled out the form and paid the admission fee. On the day of the event, I loaded up the '72 Chevy and drove to the park, registered, and found my spot. While I was setting up my car, I noticed a very nice 1968 GTO parked next to me. I set up my shade structure in the space behind the truck, and I finished my setup with a refrigerator and a couple of chairs. I looked closer and saw that there were two attractive red-headed girls setting up chairs behind the goat. I said redheads plural because there were two of them, one of whom looked about my age and the other was probably still in school. Two very important things I missed were that there was no boy with them, and nothing on the older woman's left hand's third finger. "Good morning," I said cheerfully, and they both looked up from their studies. "Thank you, I like your truck too." The older one, "Thank you. I've attended a lot of these events, but this is the first one I'm taking part in. My name is Tom, and this is the third time my daughter and I have attended. My ex has hosted it multiple times before. My name is Marie, and this is my daughter Jenny. If that's the case, why don't you two join me in the shade when you're done? I have a cooler full of drinks, and I could use any information about these shows I can obtain." We ended up spending. She found out that she had divorced her husband 3 years prior after she caught him cheating with his boss's wife. She made a deal with him, offering to give him all the videos if he would rewrite the GTO to her. She told me it would hurt him, and she wanted to keep his job so he could continue to pay her alimony and maintenance. We spent the majority of the day here, but occasionally we would get up and talk to someone about our cars. It was a very fun day, even though I didn't win any awards. As the show was coming to an end, I suggested that they have dinner at Red Lobster, which is a few blocks away. They agreed and we drove there. I didn't really want to be depressed, but they asked and told me their story, so I listed the highlights and told them that my kids were happy. Jenny was also friendly and joined in the conversation. She told me that she was very angry at her father for cheating and that she had nothing to do with him anymore. Jenny was shocked when she said, "I'm so sorry for you, Tom. You're such a good guy and you don't deserve anything like this." Marie put her hand on my shoulder and said, "I'm so sorry for you." I chose to change the topic to something more pleasant, and we ended up talking and laughing for another hour. It seemed like we had a genuine connection and we exchanged numbers. Marie and I reconnected the following weekend after I called, and she enthusiastically agreed to dinner and dancing. I kissed her on the cheek and walked her to the door. As I turned to leave, I noticed a red-haired teenage girl in the window grinning and giving me the thumbs up. After 2 more dates, I invited them both over to my house and cooked. Jenny gave me a big smile as they were leaving, winked, and gave me the thumbs up. I realized that she didn't mind me seeing her mom again either. Food Network, a few YouTube videos, and a lot of trial and error led me to learn how to cook fairly well. My lasagna turned out really well, so I decided that they seemed to like it. However, I overheard Marie telling her daughter that it definitely needed a feminine touch. I wouldn't have argued if I had been asked. The next weekend, I was invited to visit them, and Marie cooked so beautifully that my weak attempts were embarrassed, even though Kayla wasn't as good as Marie. The biggest compliment you can give a woman who loves to cook is that Jenny is almost as good as you are. 2 weekends later, I took Marie out to dinner, and then to a dance club, where we danced for a while until a slow song came on, and we pressed against each other, swaying to the beat of music, and ended up kissing pretty hot. I was rude as hell, but I just couldn't stop eating, so I finally had to apologize to them for making a pig out of myself. They laughed and asked why I was apologizing. She leaned over and whispered in my ear a few weeks ago, "Take me home, honestly." I was shocked because I thought we were having a great time, and now she wanted to go home. I pulled back and looked at her. She must have noticed my expression and started laughing. "Ah, you silly man, I meant take me to your house." Fortunately, I had my regular truck, not a 72, so I'm sure I could have kept the tires on the road if I had driven home in the 72. I made her breakfast before I drove her home, and I received another double thumbs up from the red-headed teenager, and a few months later, I asked her about the window, and she replied that it was a straightforward ceremony before a judge. They moved into my house immediately after the wedding, and Jenny even began calling me Daddy. It was a great life with agreements and disagreements. Jenny was a teenager, and I was the authority figure at times, so I had to say no, but she still respected me, and her mother loved me. A year or so later, I received an unexpected call from a number I didn't recognize. "Hello," I said, answering the phone. The phone rang. "Hello, Daddy." And a happy female voice said, "Carly, it's me, and I have great news, really. It's good to hear from you." I was really happy to hear from her, and I think she might have been trying to mend the relationship. "I'm getting married, which is fantastic, honey. And I'm so happy for you in any way. I want to attend my wedding, of course, because it's one of the greatest honors for a father to walk his daughter down the aisle. I've also set up a wedding fund for you, but Clarence is covering the costs. He'll be walking me down the aisle. And since it will be awkward for you and Mom to sit together, you won't be sitting in the front pew. But I really want you to be there. Clarence." "Do you mean that jerk your mother cheated on me with? Did she really marry that piece of look, Dad? I'm trying to mend our relationship, and I wanted you to be at my wedding. In addition, after you left, she and Clarence began dating more frequently, fell in love, and got married. It's really your fault if you hadn't abandoned us. I can see that you still believe your mother did nothing wrong, so I will not be able to attend the ceremony for 2 reasons. First, I simply cannot support a marriage that I know will fail because you will probably cheat on your husband, just like your mother cheated on me. If he is in any way someone I approve of, he will kick you out the moment he finds out. Secondly, you just took away my father's last great honor from me and gave it to a dirty witch who intentionally wooed a married woman, which further demonstrates how shallow and self-centered you've become. If you're going to act like that, you won't see your grandchildren if you raise them the way you are, and I still don't want anything to do with them. Dad, Mom, you are an ass click." That was the last thing I heard from my daughter before I hung up the phone. I wanted it to be more drivable, and rebuilt a 350 engine that was only. I was so angry at my father that I tried to talk to him, and he had the audacity to say that it's his fault that our family is disintegrating. I tried to be nice and invited him to my wedding, but he just threw everything back in my face. I was hoping that he would finally take responsibility for what he did to our family. I was so angry that I didn't even notice Jenny sneak out from around the corner and grab my phone. I didn't even know she was home, Carly. During the wedding planning process, I recognized the number, but there were numerous calls like that. "Hello? Is that Carly Williams?" "Yes, what can I do for you? Please stop calling my dad and being so cruel to him. He's the best man I've ever met, and he doesn't deserve to have a spoiled, stupid person like you call him and remind him of the pitiful remnants of humanity that you are, I swear. Your family is a waste of space. My name is Jenny Williams, and I'm your sister. My mom married your ex-dad, and he. The saddest part of all of this is that you don't seem to mind. Let me tell you that my biological father cheated on my mom, and she didn't hesitate to kick him out. You can be sure that if my mom had ever cheated on my dad, I would have assisted him in getting her ass out with somebody else. I love him with all of my heart, and I would never consider showing him any disrespect or dishonor. You are an insult to daughters everywhere. You can also tell your grandparents that they have another granddaughter, but I have no desire to be in a relationship with someone so vile as to reject my own son for cheating and her betrayal. The rest of the trash, yes. Even though he is not my biological father, He is the most decent, caring, compassionate man I've ever met. I'm considering sending your mother a card to thank her for being such a big fool to let him go. One more thing, offspring. When you say your fake vows, look into your husband's eyes and imagine what he would do if he cheated on you. Then, when he does, call me and tell me about it so I can laugh at you. You have a shitty life, sis." She hung up, and I just stared at my phone in shock. First, I was shocked to hear that my father had gotten married. You would think that he would have at least sent his children an invitation. Then I discovered that he had a younger sister as well. It was a strange thought that I couldn't get out. I initially assumed that Dad must have had a very good reason for leaving, and that I could probably live with him instead of Mom. But Mom clarified that she was feeling fine, and that she just needed this small thing to restore her strength. Because after all, it was only a brief period of time compared to how long they had been together, and she was willing to stay. This was because she looked a lot like me before Mom told Josh and I that Dad was leaving and was going to tear the family apart over one insignificant little thing. I couldn't believe how rude she was to me. She wouldn't even give me the opportunity to tell her that Dad was the one who left us and that Mom was trying to move on. It seemed as though she didn't care that it was just a one-time incident that shouldn't have gone unnoticed given how long they had been together. And then she had the audacity to call me all these derogatory names. Together, we could have worked things out, but Dad was the one who was pig-headed and wouldn't even try. She doesn't even know me, so what was Daddy upset about? Of course, Clarence was going to walk me down the aisle because he had supported me for the past few years. I hadn't spoken to Dad since Josh and I expressed our anger at his departure, and on top of that, Clarence was paying nearly $20,000 for my wedding. I couldn't even begin to imagine how much money my dad had saved for my wedding. When my mom and both grandmothers arrived 30 minutes later, I was still upset about those phone calls. Grandma Williams exclaimed, "Oh, that's wonderful." I asked him if he was coming because I haven't heard from him since he called about Thanksgiving a few years ago. I sighed. No. And he became irate when I told him that Clarence would be walking me down the aisle and that I'm his only daughter. My mom noticed my mood right away, honey, so I told him about the wedding and asked him to come. Too awkward for him to sit in the front pew with Mom and Clarence. That's too bad. I thought he had already gotten rid of his piggish. But 5 minutes later, I learned that I have a half-sister who sounds like 3 parts harmony. The girl called me a few minutes after Dad hung up, and she was not very nice on the phone. In fact, her nicest thing was that she wanted to thank my mom for being foolish, or she wouldn't have such a great dad. My wedding day had finally arrived, and I briefly considered what my father had said. For a moment, I was sad that he wouldn't be here on my special day, but that was okay. I'd approached him and he'd rejected me. I brushed it off after all was said and done. I told them about both phone conversations, and they were shocked by how strongly Dad and Jenny had spoken on the phone. Tom got married, and we weren't invited to the wedding, and he didn't even tell us about it. Happy day, I was getting married to the man I would spend the rest of my life with. Clarence was beaming with joy as he took my hand and we began walking down the aisle to the wedding march music. I was ecstatic to see all of my friends and family, including my grandparents, Josh, one of Bobby's groomsmen, and everyone else there to celebrate my special day. I looked ahead and saw Bobby grinning at me as he stood in front of the priest. As we passed my mother, looking at me with pride, Clarence lifted my veil, kissed my cheek, and said, "Congratulations, baby girl." He then handed me into the arms of my future husband. I had a weird feeling when the priest asked who gave this bride away, and Clarence said, "Her mother." Something didn't sound right, but I couldn't understand why at the time. So I looked into the eyes of my true love and repeated promises to have and to hold in sickness, health in good times and bad, force si forza. I couldn't say it because it looked directly into Bobby's eyes. But then I remembered what they had said on the phone. I was staring into my soulmate's eyes when I suddenly saw him with another woman. The picture changed, and I was now staring into the lifeless eyes of a broken man who told him that I had sex with another man. These images flashed through my head, and the words came out without thinking. I now understand if I had felt like We were being watched by the public before it was nothing like what it was now. Bobby looked at me worriedly, and then it was like a weight had been lifted off me. I finally said to Bobby, "Oh, that's really great, Carly, but what did you suddenly realize? Absolutely everything." And he replied, "Oh, that's really great, Carly, but what did you suddenly realize? Absolutely everything." I then got serious. "Bobby, do you really love me?" "Of course I love you. How can you even ask that I have to this because I can't marry you today?" The audience gasped in shock. "And we'll still get married, but not I'm going to marry you, Bobby, and I'll explain everything to you so you'll understand. But we need to go and start making things right. We'll reschedule everything for another day and have our wedding. You're not going to leave me at the altar, are you?" "No way. In fact, you should come with me." I turned to the guests and said, "I'm sorry, but I just can't go through with that." In any case, to make up for your disappointment, the reception hall needs to be ready. Everything has already been paid for with non-refundable deposits, so why not take advantage of that? The bar is open, so eat, drink, dance, and be merry. We simply postpone our wedding today, and we'll notify you all when we set a new date. We understand if you choose not to attend, but just consider the story you will be creating for years to come. After saying, "Clarence will pay the bill," I took Bobby's hand and began to walk back down the aisle when my mom blocked my way and Clarence was standing next to her. He didn't seem happy that I had just flushed over $20,000 down the toilet, and I also noticed that everyone was now focused on this new argument. Those who had gotten up to leave the reception stopped at the venue to watch the next show, and Clarence began shouting nonsense about the money he'd spent and how I was going to reimburse him every time. It was Mom's turn, Carly. "What are you doing? Where are you going?" she asked. "I'm correcting a mistake I made a few years ago." "What mistake?" "The biggest mistake of my life was the mistake I made when I listened to all that crap you were saying instead of helping Daddy kick your ass to the curb. The mistake I made when I blamed Daddy for the breakup of family while it was your own fault for cheating on him. I'm your mother, and I'm not a once a cheater always, Carly." It wasn't until I looked into Bobby's eyes during my vows that I realized what a terrible person you are. Once a cheater, always a cheater. And how terrible it would be if he ever cheated on me. I realized how much it would hurt the man I loved if he ever cheated on me. I suppose Dad was a good role model for me after all, but you sure weren't. "What do you mean, Mom?" Fear flashed in her eyes. "It's funny that you only go to the gym once a week, but what about Carlos, your pool guy, who takes an extra hour every 2 weeks because he screws your brains out on the Shaw Lounge after he cleans the pool? How about your gang banging the landscaping crew every time they finish their yard work? I have some good video footage of me coming home early a couple times, in case you try to deny it. And don't forget about your Wednesday workouts with Jim Davis, your personal trainer, who always meets at his apartment instead of the gym. How come you always tip Mario, your barber, in the back room after every haircut? At least CL is your boss at work, so he doesn't have to worry about you cheating on him with your boss. Am I missing someone? Oh, I almost forgot Alan Morris, your neighbor who has been coming over for the past 3 years whenever his wife has a girls' night out." Her eyes briefly shifted to Clarence as I finished laying out her dirty laundry. Maybe she hoped he hadn't heard me, even though I had said it, loud enough to be heard across the church. Was standing less than 2 feet away from me, and as he looked at Clarence, a look of complete shock appeared on his face. "I had a bad thought, and I vowed to pay back the money you spent on the wedding, just like my mother did when she made her vows. We all know that she keeps her word, so you can be sure that I will honor this vow just as she keeps hers." He shouldn't hold his breath waiting for a dime, though, seeing that Mom was preoccupied. So I dragged Bobby down the aisle and stopped briefly to speak with the videographer. Yes, he captured the entire event on camera. He gave me a copy of the videotape and smiled widely, providing me with a backup in case the original was damaged. I promptly signed the authorization form to upload the video to YouTube, hoping it would go viral and make my mom feel even more ashamed. Bobby and I then leaped out into the parking lot after he had driven his car here, and our bags were in the trunk, which we intended to move them into. As we roared out of the parking lot, he asked, "Where are we going?" "Go west on 156, I replied. "I'll find the address and put it in Waze." His brother was going to drive him back to his apartment. After the reception, I slid into the passenger seat, smiling, knowing that Dad would really like Bobby. When he turned on the ignition, the huge 440-cylinder engine roared to life. Sure, it wasn't a GM, but the 1969 Challenger was still a beast. It's not common to open the front door and see a woman in a wedding dress and a man in a tuxedo, but if you were a priest and lived in a church it would probably happen occasionally. I knew the town he lived in, and a search of the real estate records gave me the information I needed. He was about 2 hours away, and we could only hope he would be home when we got there. I didn't stop to change because I was on a mission and didn't want to waste time. Even more unexpected was the fact that I knew exactly which one was which. I had no idea who it was, but it was unquestionably my oldest daughter, who had made it clear that she didn't want to see me anymore. I remembered that today was her wedding day, but I couldn't figure out why she was here. She must have been at the church reception or on her way to her honeymoon, and standing on my doorstep was the last place she should be. "Daddy, could I talk to you for a minute, please?" she asked in a tiny. I backed up and let them in, pointing to the living room, where Marie and Jenny were seated. I saw the shocked expressions on their faces and I said, "Oh, Carly, this is my wife Marie and our daughter Jenny Marie. I'm sorry, but I don't know who the guy with her is." "Oh yes, Dad. This is my fiancé Bobby Jensen Bobby, and this is my dad Tom Williams." His wife Marie and my sister Jenny introduced Carly's fiancé. "I assumed he was already your husband, but didn't you just get married a few hours ago? I need to talk to you about this because I can't get married today unless my father walks me down the aisle." "You're right, you've always been right. I apologize for getting caught up in Mom's shit and blaming you. Mom gave up on us, not you. I'm sorry for everything I said and did. You didn't deserve it. I won't justify my actions because there aren't any other than the fact that I was foolish and young and listened to the wrong people. I just hope you can find it in your heart." It was totally unexpected. I probably should have been concentrating on other things, but there seemed to be an elephant or two in the room. Nevertheless, I was very happy that my daughter had decided that I wasn't the bastard who had abandoned them and wanted me back in her life. "I really want to marry Bobby because he's a really great guy and I know you'll like him. But I can't get married unless you agree to walk me down the aisle and marry me off. I assume you were at the wedding because Carly was wearing a wedding dress and Bob was wearing a tuxedo." She looked at herself and then at her fiancé. "Oh yes, we were halfway through the ceremony when she said, 'Maybe you should watch Bobby and I change into our regular clothes.' Bobby ran to the car and got a suitcase, and Marie escorted Carly into the bedroom so they could change. I recorded this while it was happening. When Carly and Bobby were ready, Marie returned and sat down beside me. I then hit the play button on the remote control. The wedding ceremony began as usual, with the groomsmen leading the bridesmaids down the aisle and then splitting up at the altar. Bobby then entered with the priest and a ring, followed by the flower girl, and finally, Clarence led Carly down the aisle. Everything was fairly normal until Carly began saying her vows, but even that was normal until a certain point when she suddenly found it difficult. I was about to ask her what she was talking about when Carly stopped trying to say her vows and changed everything. We watched the video of her stopping her wedding and then confronting her mom, and I was shocked by her revelations. It seemed, like her cheating had increased since she married Clarence. By the time the video ended, Carly and Bobby had changed clothes and gone back to the living room, and I just couldn't handle it. She seemed to be stuck on one word. When I looked into Bobby's eyes, I realized how much it would hurt him if I did anything to him. "What did Mom do to you?" I finally understood what renouncement meant, and after realizing that Mom had broken her vow, I realized that I had dishonored you by marrying you without the place of honor you deserve. How can I say such solemn vows at a ceremony where the place of honor is held by two of the most dishonorable people I know? How can these vows have any real meaning if they don't include the most honorable person I know? Clarence Carly paused. for a moment, then smiled and looked at Jenny. In addition, I need my little sister to be a bridesmaid. It was your kick in the ass that woke me up. I remembered what you said to me as I looked into Bobby's eyes trying to say my vows. How can I get married if you won't stand by my side? I realized that if I truly wanted these vows to have meaning, I had to be led down the aisle by my dad man, who truly taught me values and integrity. It was crucial that we speak for a few more hours. I was unaware that Jenny had taken Carly's number from my phone immediately after I left for the workshop. That afternoon, after Carly called, Jenny went to her room and a short while later called Carly on her own phone. It was getting late, so I asked them to spend the night in the guest bedroom. Throughout the evening, Carly received multiple calls, ignoring those from Kayla and Clarence, but also a number of her friends, apparently some of the guests. When he arrived at the reception venue, a few dozen people were already there taking advantage of the open bar. Food was already being prepared, and all of the servers, bartenders, and DJ were already set up and working. Clarence gave up, grabbed a drink, and moved to a table in the corner to drown his sorrows. Josh sent her a video that he had taken with his phone, but when Mom came over to speak to Clarence, it didn't seem to go as planned. Since Carly and Bobby had already taken time off work for their honeymoon, Josh said he was able to cancel his plane and resort reservations, but had to pay a 20% penalty for not canceling on time. They stayed with us all week, and I was able to reconnect with the daughter I had thought I had lost. I also got to know Bobby better. He's a great guy with strong morals. CL Clarence was yelling a lot, and the words cheating took up most of the conversation. It seemed like that relationship was about to end as well. Tense at first because all he had heard about me were lies from my ex-wife, son, and daughter. Well, not exactly lies, but embellishments of the truth that portrayed me as a bad guy who abandoned his family. A number of crucial details were also omitted from these conversations, but once the truth began to surface, he began to treat me more kindly. It also helped when I showed him my store and my most recent projects, even though he preferred the vintage Dodges. Hey, we're over the course of the following few months. Carly and Bobby called everyone in the wedding party to give them the latest information. At least he wasn't one of those wimps who drive an automatic, and his Challenger had a manual transmission. A new wedding date was set for the same weekend a year later, and this time I would be paying for her and walking down the aisle. In addition, Marie was going to be asked to assist with the wedding. Yes, Jenny was going to be a bridesmaid. We put a lot of effort into repairing our relationship, and Bobby and I also got to know one another better. We went to a lot of car shows, where we participated in Marie's GTO, my '72 truck, Bobby's Challenger, and even got Jenny to drive the 1974 Firebird I bought her. Every month, Carly and Bobby would come over and spend a few days with us. Josh even made an appearance a few times, which was difficult for him because he was always closer to his mother than to me. But I believe he helped us re-establish some of our relationship. The good news for Kayla was that Clarence had filed for divorce due to irreconcilable differences rather than adultery, which meant that the harsh penalties of the prenuptial agreement would not apply. He filed in a way that ended the marriage quickly and amicably. It was more for Carly's sake than mine, but I agree that he always had some news from home. On top of that, Clarence had a prenuptial agreement, argued that all of his premarital property was exempt from division. Kayla would receive half of the property he acquired during the marriage, but even that would not be sufficient when you take into account the property she acquired prior to the marriage. She would primarily receive the house for about $50,000. As for the house, Clarence attempted to obtain a portion of it, but lacked any evidence that he was entitled to it. It was his money that was used to purchase my share following the divorce, but there was no concrete evidence that he took. Clarence ended up paying off the loan, but accomplished nothing, because by the time he realized that the money for the house would not be returned to him, it was too late to file an adultery complaint. Rumors of Kayla's adventure spread, and her credibility in the community was damaged. He took out a business loan for his company to obtain the money, but they never recorded exactly what he spent it on, and they never put his name on the certificate. of title for the house because the house had belonged to Kayla before they were married. Because she didn't work and was dependent on Clarence's money, the community suffered greatly. Friends stopped inviting her to parties, charity events, and other events, and her financial situation worsened. Clarence learned a costly lesson as he lost a couple $100, had to pay Kayla $50,000 in the divorce, and had to buy out my half of the house. Kayla was also humiliated that her adventures had been made public, and that Clarence was divorcing her in this manner. She began telling her remaining friends that she had cheated on him because he had a tiny penis and didn't even know how to use it properly. She also told all of her girlfriends that he wouldn't lick her despite her demands that she suck him off. This type of gossip spreads like wildfire, and soon all the women he tried to court at the bar simply laughed at him. He turned into a recluse who only went to work and home, and his social life quickly vanished. Ready for Daddy, my oldest. My daughter said, "No father is willing to let his daughters go, but I'm honored to do it for you." The doors opened, and the church filled with music. I stepped in with my left foot and proudly led my daughter down the aisle. I glanced over, and my smile widened even more. My ex-wife was seated in the fourth row, and my wife Marie was taking her place of honor in the front row. After attending to one final significant honor for my daughter, who gives this woman in marriage as a father, I give her I turned and walked over to sit next to my wife, leaving everyone else behind. Carly practically shouted the last phrase, then she finished her vow with a bright smile. It was a beautiful ceremony, and when they kissed at the end, there was a round of applause. I said loudly, "I love you, baby," kissed her on the cheek, and handed her to Bobby. Oh, I forgot to mention my wife. No, this wasn't my idea. Carly had asked me to do it that way. My last great achievement for my daughter was finished when I walked her down the aisle, married her, made a beautiful toast to the newlywed couple, danced a father-daughter dance with my daughter, and then danced with Marie. Kayla was sitting at a table off to the side, and every time she looked up, she didn't look happy. She frowned and used the open bar. Clarence hadn't been invited, and I'm not sure if he would have come even if he had been invited. I sat at the table next to my wife while her husband and his parents danced to the second song. My youngest daughter was dancing with one of the crowd guys, claiming her attention. "Excuse me, Marie, won't you let me ask your husband to do this?" I turned to face my ex-wife Marie, who stared at her for a long time before responding, "Just make sure to return it to where you found it." She looked at me. "I trust you, but don't you do anything. You were supposed to give me that one night where we would forget about it and carry on with our lives as usual. Tonight was supposed to be just the two of us, and you shouldn't have left that night. You should have known better than to think that I wouldn't mind you cheating on me no matter how many times you did." I led Kayla to the floor, and a slow song began to play. I wouldn't be surprised if she had asked for it for that exact reason, so I tried to keep my distance to avoid pulling her away. We danced for a while before she spoke. "You know you're the only man I've ever loved. I've never had the slightest love for him. And aside from the fact that the sex wasn't that great, he was selfish, and he wasn't even as big as you. So why did you marry him when you divorced me? I didn't cheat. I told you about it before I did. And I didn't sneak around behind your back whether you told me or not. The fact that you had sex with someone else is cheating, and I didn't give you permission. But you did it anyhow. Although I didn't love him, I did like him after you left. I didn't want to be alone, so I thought I could love him but couldn't get over you. I did all those horrible things to you because I was upset that you left me. But you wouldn't even talk to me after that one night. I knew that you were all needed, so why did you cheat on him? He was a failure in bed and I thought I could train him. But he refused to listen to my advice, so I stopped giving him. I didn't know Carly knew anything about it, and even if I had, I never would have imagined that she would leave me to my own devices like that. I feel so bad for you because we had a really great marriage, but you abandoned it for one night of mediocre sex. I don't think there's any chance I couldn't laugh not laughing. He would just stick it in the pump for a few minutes, erupt, roll over, and fall asleep when I couldn't take it any longer. I found a couple other guys who could actually bring me to orgasm. I am now remarried to the woman I love and have another daughter that I love as well. The best thing you can do is to be in the same place and at any events with our children and grandchildren. Fortunately, the song ended quickly, and I never spoke to her again after that. She couldn't afford to pay the mortgage on the house, so she sold it and moved into a small apartment. To start, even if I hadn't been married, what you did by forcing my children on me destroyed any chance of us ever getting back together. Carrie and Bobby had a long and loving marriage. They had 3 children, 2 boys and 1 girl. And Josh eventually married a nice girl. They had 2 daughters, War, and, as far as I know, neither of them cheated on each other. The money from the sale of the house was enough for her to live on if she was careful. She occasionally went on dates with her girlfriends, but as far as I know, she never had any other relationships. Clarence ended up living alone, since I couldn't harm them in any way without going to jail or facing retaliation, Clarence. I chose to just move on and live my life to the fullest. They say that the best kind of retaliation is a life well lived, so that's what I did. Karma took care of the rest. She is a stripper named Revenge, and Kayla didn't burn, but they left unharmed. No, I had nothing to do with it, but I still feel good because I have my wife, daughter, and 2 other children back in my life, surrounded by people who care about me, and I lead a wonderful life. My daughter said, "I'm honored to do it for you, but no father is willing to let his daughters go." The doors opened, and the church filled with music. I stepped in with my left foot and proudly led my daughter down the aisle. My wife took her, place of honor in the front, grinning widely, and I joined her after taking care of one last crucial honor for my daughter. "Don't worry, Dad. I'm going to do it today." I spoke with Carly, and Jenny promised me that I would do it correctly the first time. That's it. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that made you question everything, only to find closure years later? Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe, and it really means a lot.